1, 2, 3, swing it.
Do you have an old sound tape or your favorite cassette tape that you want converted to CD or MP3 format? Do you need a demo CD, radio ad, a DJ or even a sound system for your wedding, birthday or special occasion? Then why not get in contact with KTR Records on 07931 152 448 or check out our website on www.ktrrecords.com. We have been in business since 2004 and also undertake community projects. So for your remixes, doublets and all your sound editing needs, why not contact KTR Records, official sponsor of World Jam Global Radio. KTR Records, coming your way!
I was terrified about sharing the vulnerabilities of people with difficulties reading and spelling words. However, I could see the value in sharing, and I have taken the time to make some notes about this in my book, Dyslexic: The Silent Difference. You can get your copy now at www.a1tribe.com or amazon.com or amazon.co.uk. Thank you again everyone for your support.
Do you like music like this?
Great music all the time.
Or like this?
The music you love.
Maybe this.
Great music that makes you want to turn up the volume loud.
Or life check like this.
Especially where human life is concerned. Surely, sooner or later people will realize that lives actually matter.
Then you're in the right place. Keep it locked to World Jam Global, where music is harmony.
Music 24 hours a day, 365 days a year.
Yeah, you're my World Jam. Hotter than them.
See live schedule.
You see, it's here. You see. New feature coming from World Jam Global Radio in 2018. World Jam Global Top 10. To vote for your favorite artist, go to twitter.com/WorldJamGlobal or facebook.com/WorldJamGlobal. So pick the right track where you want to have in your car, at your house, and rock. At them.
Already did my time, I paid for my crime.
In just a few moments,
Already did my time, I paid for
we have the return of Rev Victor White.
Already did my time, I paid for my crime.
Please take this opportunity to share this live stream across the world.
Already did my time, I paid for my crime. Back in the day, I didn't really care about the system. It was all about survival. It was do or die. I had too many rivals. I was too young and foolish to stay in school. I learned my lessons in the street. There was not a man I couldn't beat. I was good with my hands and very quick on my feet. I was swimming in women. I had girls all over the street. I was getting money. Life was so sweet. Now things have changed. The whole game has been rearranged.
I'm going to give you a rundown in a very few short moments.
Gun in my hand. It ain't about being no gangster. Life is too short to spend it all in jail. Trying to cope with this living hell. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
But I just got to make sure that we got people listening all over the world.
Paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. I was a drug dealer, sold more drugs than Superfly, but I never got high on my own supply. I'm not proud of what I had to do. That's why I'm telling my story to you and you. I had to repent, I must admit, I was doing all kind of stupid shit. Now I'll sit back and think it over since I've gotten older. The life I used to live, I wouldn't do it again. I was young and dumb, my brain was so numb. I was a real Forrest Gump, but I was nobody's chump. Me and Billy the Kid had a lot in common. I was the real Terminator, much meaner than Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'd chew you up and spit you out like a real alligator, especially all you haters.
The opening statements are going on right now. He could be facing life in
my time, paid for my crime. Already did my time. Already did my time, paid for my crime.
Once again, want to give big shouts to all of you that are tuned in and listening right across the world. A big shout out to Lorraine Thompson, Yolanda McNair, and all the other committed listeners, wherever you may be.
Already did my time.
My name is Kervin Julian. This is Issues Today on World Jam Global Radio.
So I can get
going out worldwide on live internet.
An ordinary citizen.
You can get us on www.worldjamglobalradio.com.
Statewide, worldwide.
Find us on YouTube, Facebook, and all other social media platforms.
My hands and very quick on my feet. I was swimming in women. I had girls all over the street. I was getting money. Life was so sweet. Nothing
for your live in the uninterrupted version. Don't forget, you can get us live also on YouTube.
And it ain't about being no gangster. Life is too short.
The link's available on this thread.
Trying to cope with this living hell. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
Now this month we see several guests return, and today is the first of those, Rev Victor White. And we're going to continue the update on the death of Lil Vic. Now I just want to remind you of how speechless this one left us, right? Lil Vic was arrested for no good reason, handcuffed in the back of a squad car, having been searched at least twice, and no weapon was found.
Doing all kind of stupid.
They ask us to believe that Lil Vic reached into his waist, pulled out a gun he never had, and then impossibly shot himself in the chest, with his hands still handcuffed behind his back.
Real Terminator, much meaner than Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Now that's some Houdini stuff right there.
Like a real alligator, especially all you haters. Already did my time, paid for my crime.
Now we believe that there was so much that we didn't get to say on last show, so we've invited his father, the Reverend Victor White, back for a second time, so we can remind ourselves of this ludicrous theory. He's going to be coming up very shortly. Also alongside me is my producer,
trying to cope with this living hell,
and co-presenter TJ Gallagher to her friends.
Cope with this living.
She now says I'm her friend and I can call her TJ too. Woo woo!
Yes I am, yes I am, yes I am, yes I am, yes I am. Trying to cope with this living hell.
Format of the show is going to change over the next coming weeks.
This living hell, this living hell, this living hell. Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
Do have some changes.
Our Father who art in heaven.
But I do believe it's all going to be for the better.
Kingdom come, thy will be done on earth.
More informative.
Heaven.
More interactive.
Give us this day our daily bread. And forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us.
Now we're going to get TJ to earn her crust, right?
Evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
In the meantime, please use this opportunity to share this live stream with all of the groups that you're affiliated to. Make sure that this story gets out worldwide.
All those drive-by killings, stop them. It ain't about nothing. He who was out sin, let him cast the first stone. I'm trying to get this felony off my back so I can get my life on track.
Also a special shout out to our dear friend David Phillips.
Citizen again, this is my message to all of my friends in the pen. Statewide, worldwide. And put down those knives, stop stabbing each other.
Please stand by.
Yeah.
We're about to go live. Without further ado, before I bring on Victor, let me just introduce you to my dear beloved producer and co-presenter TJ Gallagher. Now TJ had been away for a little while recuperating from an operation that she had on her knee over the Christmas period, you may remember, just into the new year. So she actually struggled to be with us. But she's here, she's back, fighting fit and ready to go. How are we doing, TJ?
We're doing good. Really, really good. We're going to have a great year.
Great.
I'm anxious to get this going.
Okay, TJ, just tell them just a little bit about you, TJ, and why you're involved with issues today, and why you've subjected yourself to punishment being alongside me.
I lost a child. He was 30, but he still was my child. And no matter what avenue I tried to go down to ease the pain and grief, I couldn't find a way. There just wasn't a way. And I didn't know where I could go, who I could turn to. It wasn't necessarily the support systems, even though they were really great. You know, I was just, all of a sudden you fell in my lap. It was just right there. And it was the perfect thing for me to consider and to be able to relate with all the people that are grieving. And I think sometimes you need someone to be able to say, yeah, I know how you feel. And have it literal. So that's why I'm here. And it might be a multi thing. It might be a healing for me. Maybe ideas that I can give other people as they work through the corruption of our government.
Well, we so appreciate you, Teresa, and we just really look forward to everything that you're going to bring to this partnership and relationship on Issues Today on World Jam Global Radio. And me and you now, we family, okay?
Yes, thank you.
We're family. All right, so we will be hearing from Teresa throughout the show, and she's got some roles to be playing throughout the year, and as we move on, because this is going to be a great year, I believe, for us anyway. As a show, we're establishing ourselves and we're doing some really good stuff, and we really enjoy the relationships that we're making with some of the relative families that we're associating with. But we'll talk about that in some more time to come in greater detail. But without any further ado, let me introduce you to our guest, Honourable, and such a great representation that he made on his last guest appearance here on this show. But the story was just so powerful. We really didn't want to let it go much further without us revisiting it and reminding you just what a ludicrous theory it is, as painful as it might be for Victor and his family. But we wanted to highlight it and bring it back to the surface again. So please welcome, and he's going to give you a quick intro, the Reverend Victor White. How are we doing, Vic?
I'm doing well. This is great. And yourself?
I'm doing great, mate. We're doing great. I'm not sure why we can't hear you clearly, but you're coming across very muffled, Vic.
Let me see if I can try it this way. How about, is it any different now?
Yeah, it's sounding a lot clearer.
Okay.
So if you can just give us give us an introduction, my friend, and tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll start talking about Little Vic afterwards. But let's talk about you for a while. Tell us who you are, what you do, where you're from, and what you're about, please, Vic.
Sure. Rev Victor White, Senior pastor church. I've been a pastor for 14 years, and ministry is going well. Also, I'm a licensed addiction counselor and working on my professional license to counsel, supervise individuals, and we live actually from Alexandria, Louisiana. Presently, we living in Lake Charles, Louisiana. My wife, we have 9 children. 5 girls and 4 boys, with the death of Little Vic, but we still have 9 children. And, and that's where the struggle continues, even though it'll be 5 years in next month. 5 years next month that, they murdered him and got away with murder. And yes, so we're still out there pounding the ground, keeping the boots on the ground, keeping individuals informed of the story, reaching out to others who've had the same plight or suffer the same plight as my family has, and making sure that we all understand that we're the support of each other, we have support of one another, and we want to make sure that individuals don't feel that they're alone as we did initially.
Amen. I do remember sharing this platform with you just before Christmas sometime. I'm sure it was in December, early December, but it was such a powerful and moving story. And TV movies, films don't come as intricately complicated as some of the things that we're going to divulge that they claim happened. And again, if I remember correctly, yours is not the only story where suicide. Royce Eckley was another one that we had recently where they tried to claim it was suicide, and we've had some others in the past where they've tried to claim it's suicide, and the evidence far stretches around that. But what we're also going to be looking at is the increase in that corruptive law enforcement agency in the state where you're at, which is Louisiana. And we're going to start looking at some other things that probably run parallel to your story. But first and foremost, let's just remind ourselves of what it was that we were talking about just around 2 months ago. Tell us a little bit about Vic again. Just remind the audience what he was like growing up, etc., the type of guy that he was, and then we'll talk about the case again, and then we'll bring it up.
Sure, definitely. Vic Victor White III, he was very energetic, highly motivated, and as a child growing up, he brings smiles to your face. Very smart, highly intelligent. We raised him up in the church, a junior deacon at an early age, and he would give the shirt off his back. He believed in community service, that he would also help the elders get their boxes, prepare those boxes, take it to them, help them across the street, walk the boxes to their homes if necessary, and like I said, in school, he progressed to the point where, he graduated and he was preparing to move his life on by going to Liberia and getting into school as well as working. The piece that is taken from our family is that he was the comedian of the family. He would bring smiles to the rest of the family. Every holiday he was sounding like the prankster. He brought a prank in, and he could light up a room. His smile, he had a smile that would just light up an entire room. People fell down, he goes in, and he really believed in giving of himself, so that others can be happy, so others can have experience with joy, a true joy, just by his presence. And
he was a great academic as well, wasn't he?
Oh yes, he was definitely. He was definitely excellent in academics. And so that's why we had just completed a FAFSA because he was getting ready to go to the community college and begin his quest to become a welder. And he wanted his desire was to do underwater welding.
Before we go into Lil Vic's story, Louisiana is not immune to corrupt, killed by cop stories. I suppose the biggest story to have come out of Louisiana over the recent years was the Alton Sterling, right?
That's correct.
And that was such a shocking story indeed. But what would you say was the real downfall of local law enforcement and their mismanagement of these community-related issues?
Well, Well, like I said, I'm not sure if it would be mismanaged because it is it's common. It's a common event. It's just that because of the cell phones, the media, different type of media sources that we could capture these now, because it was always going on. It's just that now we had a media source to capture it and also put it out there where the public can see it. Yeah, and also the other part to it is that, we always had the systemic these systemic issues that was going on in the deep south, and Louisiana included, and more so corrupt than any other state within the South or the United States itself. So with the Alton Sterling Monson case, there are several other cases. That was Christmas. We got Keenan Ordway. We had an individual in Winfield, Louisiana, Baron Scooter Pikes. He was tased to death. We got and all these officers got off. No conviction of the officers because of the fact that they used those those words that gets them off. I feared for my life, even though their life was not in jeopardy at all.
And in most cases, even when the evidence is quite rightly suggesting that there was no reason for the officer to fear for their life, there still seems to be no prosecution, no family satisfaction, and it's not about revenge, because we're not talking about revenge, are we? We're just talking about justice, straightforward justice.
Right. No, it's not about revenge, correct. It's about justice. And then, once again, when you look at Louisiana, because we're not a media-savvy national media, we don't get that much national media coverage down in our area, so therefore it's kind of hard to generate or garner that unless you push. We have to push, we have to drive from here to New Orleans and go to a place where we can show what is going on down in this area. And like you say, and then those individuals that don't have the means to make that happen, that's why their cases generally don't get the notoriety, nor do it get the media coverage that it should. And then another thing we must recognize is that the media is controlled by the sheriff's departments in the state of Louisiana. That's who the largest contributors are, those individuals. So therefore, they're not going to cover it in the manner in which it would or show what needs to be shown, because they're going to show it favored toward the law enforcement agency, and again, which they're all tied together in our state. They're saying that they're independent of one another, but the Louisiana State Police Department, they're saying they're independent, but as a investigative body, they're not going to come back and render something a negative. Something negative against whatever law enforcement agency they're so-called investigating. That's why we are pushing for a independent review board, a citizens review board. Those things where that's what we want to mandate, that they have someone, an independent investigatory body that comes in and not a part of the good old boy system or the Jim Crow system.
One of the in looking at some of the stories that I'm picking up, a lot of the incidents that involve officer involved shootings, they all seem to stem from traffic stops. What is so significant about these traffic stops that always seem to end up with a person of color being shot dead?
Well, the one thing was that they're already targeted. See, that's the other part, that the person of color, they're already being targeted. That if you're in the area that they think that you don't belong in, which in the United States is kind of difficult, but that's how they see it. If they see you driving a vehicle that they don't think that if you're a person of color should be driving, again, which I don't understand that, but that's how they look at it. For instance, I'm driving my Ford F-150, lad, I'm going into a neighborhood that's predominantly white, therefore I'm going to get pulled over because they look at my skin, they look at the truck, and then the next thing I know, when they pull me over, they already have his hands on his gun. You see, and so they try to utilize the the thing that they fear for black aggression or unarmed black men aggression or people of color aggression. Again, that's just one of those scare tactics. That's one of those things that is perceived, but yet it's still, so they put their hand on the gun immediately before you can do anything you already killed. They're getting out the car with that on their mind because they're trained not to de-escalate. They're trained to escalate because you could be telling them one thing and they want to take it in a different direction. And all it was is like, for instance, I got pulled over one night. The car was in the middle of the median, and I'm passing by him. We facing each other, so I'm passing by him, and because it was about 10 o'clock at night, and I'm on my way to my own home, he comes behind me, and he tells me, when he pulls me over, he said, well, do you know that the light on your license plate is out? I said, well, no, officer, the light on the license plate is not out because I checked it before I left. Matter of fact, well, why don't you let me get out? Let me go. No, you don't have to get out. You don't have to get out. So I told the officer, I said, well, let me ask you this. How could you see the light on my license plate was out when you was facing me when I was passing by you? And he said, well, did you see me? I said, yes, sir. I saw you sitting right there in the median. Your lights out. They have the lights out. And this. I said, yes, sir, I sure did. I saw it. So he gives me my license, my driver's license back and everything. He said, well, okay, sir, have a good evening. So again, being profiled, see, that's what a lot of it being profiled, and then everybody, the idea that we're supposed to be just as cordial. And I'm asking, okay, officer, well, I know my light is not out. What did you really pull me over for?
Well, let me talk about where I want to come from first. Well, what I did say at the beginning was that traffic stops seems to be the root cause. It's the first port of call that all of these incidents seem to have in common. Yeah. It all seems to start with a routine traffic stop, and so let's examine what this routine traffic stop means, suggests, or implies. People of color immediately look shady upon appearance, which is what causes an officer to be in pursuit. B, the vehicle that they're driving is a little bit too posh for a law enforcement officer to believe that individual has earnestly, through hard work and endeavor, been able to afford to buy himself a decent vehicle. And I'm trying to think of what C could be, and I can't think of a C at the minute because I'm stuck. Because I'm trying to work out what motivates a law enforcement officer to target people of color routinely through traffic stops. And I really wish I had my dear friend like Jerry Summers or Jonathan Newton or somebody else here who can tell me what the agenda is when they have their station briefs in the morning before they leave the station, because I imagine, you watch it on TV, don't you? They all go into a room and then the sergeant stands up and says, yeah, we're having this, and you two, you're going to go over there, and you two are going to work together as partners today, but we've got this going on in the area, and we've had reports of that going on, and you guys need to keep your eyes open for this and that and whatever. I'd like to be a fly on the wall to find out what was actually happening in that briefing room prior to these guys coming out on the street, because again, I'm just referring to the fact that all of these cases, and I'm trying to look them up one by one, and I'm trying to find one that's different, but they all have routine traffic stops as the initial trigger point for an escalation to violence where someone is shot dead by a law enforcement officer. And I'm trying to get my head around that. Is there any explanation that you can offer from your side of the waters, Reverend Victor?
Right, when you say, for me, I go back to the point that, as you said, it's just the color of the skin. It's the color of your skin that you shouldn't be able to afford that type of vehicle. And then a lot of times it's compared because the officer may make $13 an hour and you make $50 an hour. and that seems to get them upset when you tell them, I can afford this, and if they want to see, something showing that it belongs to you, well, the registration says it belongs to me, and you have a copy of the registration, and then sometimes that's the first thing they want to say. Well, what type of job do you have? Well, officer, what does that have to do with you pulling me over? Why did you stop me? My job has no reason for you to stop me. My job has no reason for us to have a conversation at this point. And then when you tell them what type of job you have, then the first thing, well, where do you work at? And once again, we're getting off track because you're trying to get me to say something so that you could come back and say I was misleading, because, that once again, the misleading part is resisting arrest here. And Louisiana, all you got to do is tell them something they deem that is a lie. They charge you with resisting arrest for withholding information or providing false information, when in fact that the information may be true. It's just that they can't find out or verify it. But that don't stop them from arresting you.
So the trigger point to all of these escalations of violence, or the starting point, shall I say, is the routine traffic stop, which seems to be generated by jealousy.
Yes.
Okay, so black guys shouldn't be driving a decent car. Full stop. Right? Now, secondly, not all guys that are stopped are driving nice or fancy cars. So there has to be another issue that triggers this behavior from a law enforcement officer to automatically presume that a person of color driving a vehicle is a criminal or is intending to commit a criminal. Let me just say this. You see, we used to have a charge over here in the UK, which was eventually outlawed in the late 70s, early 80s, and it was called sus. And the sus law was specifically targeted to people of color. And a police officer would say this: I believe that you were stood there because you intended to rob that house, or rob that car, or break into that shop, or pickpocket from that person's bag. And they would take you to court on this charge that an officer believed that the reason why you were there was because you were about to commit a crime. Not that you had tried, attempted, or even made a move to. It is his assumption that that's what you were going to do. And do you know how many people of color were sentenced to prison on this sus charge? There was never a white guy, and I'm sorry, people might get offended when I raise the race card. I'm not raising the race card, because the legislation outlawed it, because statistically they found out that this particular charge was only directed at people of color. So I want to explain a situation that will make you understand a little bit better what this sus law meant. Right? So just bear with me, and then we're going to go into Little Vic's story. I went up to a place in East London called Whitechapel as a young man. I was about 14 or 15 years of age. And there was 4 of us that had travelled from West London to East London with an older gentleman that was a friend of ours to go and cash his cheque. He had to go to his father's house to get the cheque and then cash it. On our way out, we stopped off at a betting shop. We were too young to go and gamble, and so we waited outside. But he went inside and he put on his bets. And then we got on a bus and travelled back from East London across to West London, got off the bus on Edgware Road and went into a delicatessen to buy some samosas and some biscuits. I was the first one to come out of the shop, and I was confronted by 3 undercover plainclothes officers who braced me up against the wall and searched me, handcuffed me, and put me down on the floor, and then proceeded to arrest the other 3 that had come out of the shop that were with me. We were charged, and it was said that we were getting on and off a bus and pickpocketing people who were stood in the queue waiting for a bus. The woman in the officers said that they had followed us all day from 9 o'clock in the morning. The bus conductor came to court and gave evidence and said we didn't get on the bus until 2:45. The woman in the betting shop came to court and gave evidence and said that we were in the betting shop at 3:20, so we couldn't have been down there at 9 o'clock in the morning. And you know, they still found all of us guilty. Now, that was the sus law. Right? Only targeting people of color. Fortunately for us, no, we didn't die. We didn't get shot because our officers didn't carry guns. But I wondered what would have taken place if they had. Now, I want to quickly fast forward and come to where you are, right? Because the first thing that I said was this. A, all of these seems to be routine traffic stops. That's the trigger point. But the next thing, and you hit the nail on the head earlier on, Reverend Victor, is that once they've stopped the vehicle, they approach with their hand already on their gun. Which to me suggests that's an aggressive move. Right? So if you are an individual not in pursuit of criminal activity and you get a guy come to your car with his hand on the gun or he's pulling out his gun on you, you're already going to be in a fearful mode. You're the one that's in fear of your life.
Yes.
Not the officer. You're the one. You're the one that's in fear of your life because you ain't got the gun. So, have we had a look at the statistics of those killed by cops who were not in the possession of any weapon, let alone a lethal weapon?
No, not really. I mean, that does say the research, but when we look at most of them, the only one, well, I look in the state of Louisiana, you know, we talk about they said they found the gun on Alton Sterling or somebody shot her there with a gun, and I know Jordan, my son, they said it was, but they searched my son twice and didn't find a gun. I mean, moved him from one car to another car, searched him again, and after that, didn't find a gun. I've seen the officer put his hand in my son's pocket, come out, no gun. Then all of a sudden, he's in the back of a patrol car, and he produces a handgun.
You see, I want to go back and revisit that before we go on to all the rest of the corrupt stuff that we're hearing. Because I don't think our audience really fully grasps the scenario that we were referring to. Lil Vic was handcuffed before he was placed in the car, right?
That's correct.
Lil Vic was searched before he was placed in the car.
Yes, twice.
Twice. No weapon found on him. None. Right? And you would have imagined that these officers are pretty, if they're in fear of their life, right, they would have made damn sure that there was no weapons, because the way that they searched from the body down, inside the legs, around the ankles, around the waist, those are the obvious places. You know, if they said that he pulled the gun out of the back seat of that somebody might have accidentally left there before, all of these things is implausible, but they're claiming that he had the weapon on him after they searched him. So either they didn't search him or they did. But you witnessed them search him, right?
Yes, sir. All on the video. So I'm on the video doing it. The video shows it.
And it's recorded that they searched him. They handcuff him. And they handcuff him, but it wasn't just the chain loose handcuffs either, was it? What sort?
And it was the head handcuffs. It wasn't the regular handcuffs. It was the head handcuffs.
Yeah. So they're rigid, right? Absolutely rigid.
Right, can't do nothing in them. You cannot move in them.
They are rigid, solid. Right?
Yes.
It's the type of handcuffs that they normally use when they're escorting you from prison here in the UK.
Yeah.
Right? Now I know these.
Right.
I've worn them myself, so I know what we're talking about. You cannot move, and half the time you're begging them to loosen them a little bit because they're too tight.
Yeah.
Right? So he's got his hands behind his back with these rigid handcuffs. And then they want you to believe that he's managed to worm his somehow round to his waist. And I'm just trying to recreate this as we speak, by the way. I can reach around my side. I got long arms. I'm 6'2", and I can only get to the side of my waist. And he pulls out the gun. All right, so let's just say it was at the side of my waist. But I want to know how they deem it possible that he was able to shoot himself in the chest.
Right. And with his non-dominant hand on top of that.
So, tell us from your point of view what you think happened without incriminating yourself, that is.
Sure. You know, the thing I do is I look back on the history of Iberia Parish. Prior to my son, there was eight deaths under the same leadership on the Lewis Alkin, which my son was. 8 unexplained deaths by them. That the officers, these things happened, the officers encountered, they died, no one wanted to look into it. It was investigated by themselves and they come up with nothing. So, but here it is. Now, they had a thing in Iberia Parish where they would take them off and beat them and then bring them back to the jail or bring them to the hospital where they died. And so I really believe that that's what happened to my son. They took my son because I see my son was beat. Well, and here's another part that is strange, because they picked my son up about 10:45 or 11 something that night, but he didn't get to the hospital till 3 o'clock in the morning. Ambulance didn't pick him up till like 2:42 that morning or whatever. He didn't get to the hospital to like 3 o'clock that morning. But the ride to what he was taking him to was less than 7 minutes. You see, so I believe they beat my son. And I believe they produced one of those drop-down guns. And they shot my son, not realizing that my son was left-handed. They shot him on the right side. You know, and that, which is not uncommon there, because they would beat you, as we've seen that there was the 11 officers, that 12 that's convicted, 11 of those that was in prison. All of them had their stirs on how they did black men, how they went into the neighborhood nigger knocking. Just go down the street and grab somebody and just beat them. And then the sheriff gave them instructions to charge them with resisting arrest. You know?
Do you know?
So I can see, you know, these are the same individuals.
Do you know, here's the thing. A lot of people actually believe that officers are not corrupt. A lot of people don't believe that officers victimize, bully, assault people of color in custody. A lot of people don't believe that they have a hidden agenda, a different motive when it comes to arresting people of color. But unless you've actually had to live as a person of color who has been confronted by the corrupt and shameful behavior, it's very difficult for other people to comprehend. You see, I've been beaten several times as an innocent individual, and in fact, one of the reasons I became such a prolific criminal in my younger days was because of the way that the law enforcement here in the UK treated me as a person of colour. It builds up an anger, a rebelliousness, against authority in particular, that unless it's harnessed, nurtured, and dealt with in an appropriate way, can take people down roads that they never come back from.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
But there are so many of these children that we're hearing about that are not getting an opportunity to make choices because those choices are being taken away from them as their lives are being wiped out in almost a genocidal way. As these corrupt law enforcement officers sweep through state after state, wiping out the lives of young people. The unfortunate thing is, families like yourself, Reverend Victor, are left to pick up these pieces, fighting for justice. Now, when it comes to Little Vic, there was a couple of things that they didn't realize that they would trip up on. One of them was which hand they claim that he shot him with.
Yes.
So take us through that, because you're his father. If anyone knows him, you know him best. Explain that to us.
Sure, that's one thing they were saying when he was there. They said that he shot himself, and we went to it took him 6 months to complete, or 5 months to complete the autopsy in August. So when we met with the coroner, and the coroner was explaining to us what had happened, and then he told me and my wife that, that he shot himself on the right side. So I'm saying, wait a minute, you're saying he shot himself from behind his back on the right side? And so I told him, I said, well, my son was left-handed. And he said, well, based upon the information that the officer told them, that my son said, tell my family I love them, or something to that effect, and I'm gone now. And which I know my son wouldn't have said that. So when it comes time for it, and the attorney was telling me about, I said, we can prove that my son, because they were saying, well, we would have to prove that my son was left-handed. And that wasn't a problem. We could prove my son was left-handed, but the bottom line is that lets us know right there that they thought he was right-handed. If we have to prove he's left-handed, that and these are those things, like I said, that they didn't think that we would actually continue to fight. They thought they would come, set a narrative, give us that narrative, and then we would just accept what they were saying. And no, we're not going to accept that, because, as you said, I had just spoken to my son that morning. He had gotten off of work, was looking at a vehicle, and was preparing to get an apartment, and had the money in his pocket to do such. So I'm looking at that. Well, why would someone that have these things going on, preparing to move forward in life, decide to say, I'm going to take my life? It just didn't even add up. I mean, and then on top of that, his religious and spiritual beliefs, that suicide would be one of the worst things that one could do, because there's always a way out.
See, and that's where I was going to go to next, but I'm glad you actually raised that issue, because when they're trying to claim that somebody is trying to commit suicide, the one thing that they don't realize is, they got people, they got family, they're not alone. I suppose it's one thing when you're wiping out a homeless individual who's out in the middle of nowhere, many miles away from home. But, you're in somebody's backyard here. They got family, they got friends, they got people that know them and love them. So they're trying to claim that little Vic wanted to take his own life because he was in fear of what? What was it that was so dramatically frightening, right, or terrifying, that he was unable to face or cope with? What was this huge thing that he was going to find difficult to get over, that he would have to take his life? Was he being charged with molesting an underage girl, or rape, or molestation? Was he was it that serious a crime that the shame of what it was that he was being accused of was enough to drive him to suicide. What was it that they were going to be arresting and charging him for? Please tell us, Reverend Vic.
Yeah. Well, see, that was the thing. The only thing they said they was charging him for was possession of what they said a small amount of narcotics. And again, and then they come back and said cocaine. Didn't find no cocaine. Didn't produce anything. Marijuana. So they said. But we know once again that there are records of, and not only that, documented cases in Liberia where they planted the drugs on these individuals, where it produced about 186 cases had to be thrown out because of what these officers did. See, so, you know, the only thing that I can see of fearing that my son, he knew that no matter what, if he would have went to jail, phone call, you know, we get him out. That's so I know he couldn't have feared that part, and they were saying making it seem like appear to the fact that he said he couldn't go back to jail. This was going to happen, that was going to happen, and we knew better. But you know, like you say, but it's the norm in Iberia Pass for individuals to be afraid of the police officer, when which my son or my sons that wasn't their fear, because they know all we have to do is make a phone call. So I know that night he wasn't expecting to lose his life.
Because he had no reason to end his life.
Correct. Right.
And whatever charges that they could have mustered against him would not have affected his life that greatly.
Correct.
So because you said he was arrested about 10:15, 10 o'clock-ish. He didn't get taken to the hospital until after 2 in the morning. So between 4 and 5 hours that they had him. How long was he at the scene?
Well, they wasn't. They moved him, placed him in a car, and like I said, 7 minutes. It wasn't even 7 minutes. But when they picked him up, actually, from the store that they were going to, which is no more than about a block away. So, and looking at what they did, it took them less than 10 minutes. Well, it made them sit there for about 30 minutes. So we didn't get the call till about an hour later, maybe 11:40, when the young man that was with him was allowed to leave. And then we got a call, and he said he was being arrested. So I called the sheriff's department first. Then I called the jail, because normally, you know, they'll tell you what a person is en route. They can let you know that they're en route to the jail, hadn't made it. Well, they told me my son wasn't even arrested that night. You know, so you know, and so that's why I told my wife, well, there's no need for us to worry about it. They probably let him go, because the general consensus is he had less than a blunt, a joint, or whatever. Less than an ounce or less than a blunt or whatever of weed.
A gram. I think a gram is what they would be calling.
Less than a gram, and you know, less than a gram. Well, they could have gave him a citation and made him appear in court, you know, something like that. So why would why would it go any further? Because based upon even what the officer was saying, he knew he had less than a gram of marijuana on him. So what was the deal? So then they come up with another story that he said he wanted to go talk to a narcotics agent. Now, you know, those are the ones now. Those are the ones, the narcotics agent, the so-called narcotic task force, are the ones that had the history of beating and killing the individual. So now all of a sudden, that's how they get involved, according to the arresting officer.
So you know, like he gets arrested. He's found with less than a gram of weed on him. No other drugs.
Correct.
No other drugs, just about a gram of weed.
Right.
In America, you guys call it a citation. Here in the UK, we call it a caution. And a caution means it's a non-arrestable offence. So they take your name, they take your details, and they will caution you on the spot. In other words, they'll tell you that you shouldn't have this, you shouldn't be doing that, and if you're found with this again, then they could take this further. And then they let you go.
Yeah.
Right? So he's found with what is regarded as a citational amount of weed on him. Right? But they arrest him and put him in a car handcuff him behind his back. So, was he supposed to have shot himself in the car or at the station?
Oh no, he said while he was in the car, but here's the thing with that part. The video showed that they didn't take him where the station was. They took him to a remote area where there was no lighting and there was no camera. So that was the other part. He was, why did y'all put him there? And then supposedly that's where the two stories kind of conflict. The one officer say the lieutenant came. The lieutenant said he was bending over talking to my son, and when he raised his head up, he heard us when he was raising his head up.
Hold up. Let's rewind. Let's rewind this a minute, Reverend Victor. Let's rewind this a minute. They arrest him at the location. He was there for about 7 to 10 minutes maximum.
Yes.
They leave from that location. So what time did they get to the police station?
Right. Well, see, according to what we're seeing, it's saying like 12 or so, or maybe something like that. But it's only 7 minutes now from where they picked him up to where they ended up having it.
Okay, so
that's the thing.
So there is a whole almost a 2 hour to 3 hour gap between the time that he's taken away from the location until the time that they can actually correspond with him being at the police station.
Yes, which is only, like I say, 7 minutes of stretching. It's not you come right across the railroad.
No. I get all that, because my next question is this: how far is the police station from the point of where he was arrested?
Not even a half of a mile.
5 minutes drive.
Yeah, about 5 minutes. That's about 5 minutes. Even that's pushing it, but 5 minutes.
We're going to add the 5 minutes to the 7 minutes, right? So that's 12 minutes, right? So they still have a 3 hour gap to explain what happened between them and little Vic, between him being taken away from the location and arriving at the police station dead. Because they're not saying he shot himself at the police station, they're saying that he shot himself in the car, which means he never left the car. So what were they doing? What have they said that they were doing for the 3 hours they were driving around with little Vic in the car?
Right. Well, see, that's the thing. They said that he was refusing to get out the car. You know, that's the spin they put on. He refused. You telling me he's sitting there all the time? Because, like I said, now one of the other conflicts in the story was the other officer said that when he went to go and try to get help to get him out of the car, you know, then he produced a small handgun, right? But then the other officer said he was cooperative. And he was very cooperative. The video showed he was cooperative. There was no struggle. There was no refusal. You know, so you know, we had those conflicts. So whatever happened, like I said, I believe they drove him like they did everybody else. What took him where the sugar cane was, beat my son, and then brought him back. You know, or tried to attempt to take him to the jail, and he was in worse shape than what they thought he was, and brought him back and act like they was taking him to be questioned at the police station, bagged the vehicle up in the darkest place with the video on, and we're on in the lights, and that's where they shot my son at.
You see, we're not fools. If you've got a suspected villain in your vehicle, handcuffed in your vehicle, and he was refusing to get out, what do you think they would have done? In your just in your humble opinion, Reverend Victor.
Sure, you know that was the thing. They would have gotten help, or they had tasers. You know, there's all sorts of things that you could have done, and when individuals refuse to get out. If there was someone refused or resist to get out, you know, they're gonna call help. I've seen them all. You know, they grab one by the leg, the other by the arm. You know, and there are several things that they could have.
Now you're on my page, Reverend Victor. They would have just dragged him out the car. Right? They would have grabbed his legs, grabbed his arms, dragged him out and put him in a cell. That's it. But job done. Right?
Yeah. Yes.
left him there to rot for a couple of hours for him being so disrespectful, and then eventually gone and interviewed him. Because, let's get this right, they didn't pursue him in the attempt of an unarmed bank robbery. They didn't apprehend him having fired shots in a drive-by. They didn't apprehend him battering to death an elderly lady at a bus stop or a shopping queue. In fact, if I remember correctly, he actually wasn't even involved in what was going on that they attended the place for in the first place. Am I correct?
You're absolutely correct. We saw that the video showed, and then they even adopted the video after when I saw the actual video prior to them getting a copy of it. It showed my son had nothing to do with the fight. Inside the store, walks out, the people was fighting, then he comes back in the store. Well, that's the piece that is cut out the tape that they have out now. It just so happened I saw it. My daughter saw it. We actually saw the video to show that my son wasn't involved in the fight. The video that they have and that the Department of Justice have and the Sheriff Department had custody of, that piece is cut out. They show my son walking in the store, standing in the store, and then walking out the store. But they don't even show the fight on the outside when we know that the fight occurred on the outside. I saw it myself. My daughter saw it. We got a copy of it to the attorney at that time. See, so like I said, so that didn't work for him. So they had to cut the piece out where the two people was fighting on the outside, where my son was standing by on the outside of the door while those individuals fighting, and they looked nothing like my son. Nothing like my son. They had no features like my son.
So,
and if the officer would have taken my son back to the store, as in which he and the friend asked them, the officer would have found out it had nothing to do with them, and the officer even had to admit that himself. See, so that makes the stop illegal. If you're convinced that he did, so that's what you stopped him for. The initial stop was because that y'all said he was involved in a fight at the store. When you found out that he wasn't involved in a fight at the store, my son should have been let go.
Okay. Here's a question, Reverend Victor. What happened to the other two guys that were supposedly involved in the fight?
Nothing. Nothing. They never even went looking for them. There was no more search of them at all.
So the two guys that were allegedly involved in the fight at the store left the scene?
They ran. Left the scene, ran away from the scene.
And weren't arrested, weren't apprehended, weren't chased, weren't looked for.
Nope.
And they've never, ever tried to arrest the two guys that were involved in the fight.
Not at all.
And,
not at all.
And they have video evidence of the two guys who were at the store at the time of the fight. Whether they believed who was involved or not, they actually have video footage that could identify the two individuals that were at the store involved in the fight also, right?
Oh, that's correct. That's correct.
But they have never pursued the two individuals who were supposedly also involved in the fight.
That's correct.
So then, why would Lil Vic be the only one arrested it's impossible to have a one-man fight. You need two people to fight.
Yeah. That's right.
So none of this makes sense. Did Little Vic have any history with local law enforcement, Reverend Vic?
Well, with that officer, he did. See, that's the thing. That officer, maybe like about October, November, that officer said that he arrested my son and told my son, here's the statement, but he denied the statement, told my son that if he caught him again, that he was going to kill him. Now, they all denied that statement, but my son called me, and they had dislocated his shoulder, and they said they didn't find none of that. Well, he felt that because the way they did him. And so that's why I told him, I said, son, you need to report that. Well, he refused to go and report it because here's the thing. Louis Alcott had already disbanded his internal affairs department. So he no longer had an internal affairs department no more. No one to answer to, no one, because they were doing their own thing, and he was allowing it to happen. he gave an environment. He provided them a way for them to go out and abuse and misuse the individuals of the citizenry of Iberia Parish. So my son said, well, you know, I ain't gonna worry about it, Daddy, but you definitely told me that. And then also his friend said when the officer came up, the officer told my son he remembered him, he pulled him over, made him, the girlfriend, the baby, and everybody get out the car and walk. And he took my son to jail at that time, and they held him on a charge saying that it happened when he was 16 years old. And so, you know, but we got them cleared up saying that he had taken care of that. But that officer did know who he was.
So now we're getting closer to the real issue here. So there was
Justin Ortiz, the officer, Justin Ortiz.
So there was already an issue between the arresting officer and your son.
Correct.
Now you see,
because initially he came on the scene afterwards. I guess when they radioed my son's name in, that's when he came up. According to the friend and everybody else, that's when he came up in his patrol car, probably after they radioed my son's name in.
So now we can begin to understand what could possibly have been going on in the 3 hours from his removal from the location until his arrival at the station or the hospital. Now, you know when they did the autopsy on Little Vic, did they find any other bruising or anything else on his body?
Sure, they only said one mark, and they from what the coroner put in there downplayed the mark, but from on the left side of my son's body, from the top of his left eyebrow all the way below his jawbone, looked like he was hit with the butt of a shotgun. But he gonna say that the mark was consistent. That's all the coroner put in the report. That mark was consistent with the event, you know, with the event, and so that's what I'm saying. The event of them killing him. See, and that's all they put in there.
Well, the event of what? He shot himself in the chest, according to them. Right. So what event are they talking about?
Right. Well, that's all. Yeah, we couldn't get that out of them. That's the only part that the coroner put in that was consistent with the event, and that's where he left it at. And that's the same coroner. That coroner has ruled several ways for the sheriff's department, police department. You know, even one guy, the sheriff removed that this was a 14-year-old child that a auxiliary police officer brought him to the home without the consent of the mother, and they found supposedly he shot himself with a shotgun in the back of his head while looking at a fireplace or toward the mouth of a fireplace, and he ruled it suicide.
You know, the more we look at this issue, the more we revisit it, is the more ludicrous it sounds. And do these officials not realize just how stupid they look? Probably not.
Oh, that's right.
So, Little Vic gets taken away about 7 minutes afterwards. Should have taken another 5 minutes to get to the station, but it takes him about 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
He arrives. Is he taken to so does he ever get to the police station?
Sure, but right, he got there, but like I said, they backed him up where there was no light and no cameras.
Okay, so is there any? So there's no proof as to whether he came out of that car alive or dead.
None.
And then he arrives at the hospital. And how did he get to the hospital? Was it by a police station or was it ambulance paramedics?
By ambulance. It was by ambulance.
So the
ambulance. And then we didn't find that out. So they didn't want to release that. The ambulance didn't want to release, the company didn't want to release that information to us.
So the ambulance was called to the police station?
Yes.
Okay. So when the ambulance arrived at the police station, what did they say they found?
Well, they found him with a gunshot, and I was going to say, we don't get their narrative, but we got the bill, and on the bill they said that when he gets there, there's no statement really from them. The statement comes when I look at the bill that they gave. Said that they was called to 529. That was the address. Because when we were thinking all this time that my son was at the sheriff's department or at the jail. That's how we found out that he was never taken to the jail. They tried to his items were at the jail. His wallet was at the jail, earrings, stuff like that. But then the other part of his stuff was with the state troopers. So we're thinking that he was at the jail until I got the actual bill from the ambulance where it showed us where he was picked up from. Yeah.
And he was picked up from where?
He was picked up from the booking station. Not the jail, but they had us believing that he was actually at the jail when all this occurred. Okay. But he wasn't at the jail.
See, there should be a report as to what the paramedics found when they arrived on the scene, because they've got to report back the condition of the individual that they were called out to, whether he was still alive, whether he was still breathing, whether they did CPR on him, whether they found him dead, how long had he been dead when they arrived. All of this information initially would be part of their presentation back to the hospital when they get there, because they're bringing in his body and they're going to say what? He was already dead when we got there? There has to be some report.
Right. All right. Yeah, and the bishop said he was shot, and they were saying that the officers was providing CPR and all that, but that's what they supposed to say. That's the standard story. So that didn't move, because we've seen them how they put the dogs on innocent people that are just laying there. Have dogs or bite them in the jail. Have them in the jail. They take them to the chapel. And they will beat him. One guy had him simulating that he was doing oral sex and all kind of stuff in the chapel, So we know that whatever they tell us, we knew it wasn't going to be the truth.
Bill, you keep referring to a bill when you got the bill. So I got Lorraine Thompson. She's asking, were you expected to pay for this?
Oh yes, sir. Yeah, they even called me. They called me several times to pay for the bill. I'm not sure if the attorney and them doing the settlement paid for the bill or not, but I know that they sure was. They sent that to me. And matter of fact, even the hospital, when I went there, they wouldn't give me the information, but they sent me a bill as the next of kin.
Wow.
But I couldn't get any information from them when I went there about what happened to my son. How did he die? I couldn't get into that, but I got a bill from them. So, and I called the hospital and told them, well, why should I pay you a bill when I couldn't even get the information on how he died? Or what happened to him, who triaged him, who did anything.
You see, somehow we need to go back to finding out in what condition little Vic was when the paramedics arrived at the scene where they were called to, because that would determine how fresh the wound was, whether he was killed a couple of hours before and it took them that much time to decide what they were going to do or where they were going to take him. The bottom line is we need to try and find a way of working out what was going on between those 2 and 3 hours of him being taken from the location and the paramedics being called out and him arriving at the booking station or wherever it was that they eventually took him to. That's the important timeline. And I'm not sure how you guys go about finding that information out there where you are. But for me, the most important thing that I'd want to know right now is when the paramedics arrived, what condition was little Vic in? Was he still breathing or was he already dead? And if he was already dead, how long did they presume he had been dead for?
Right.
Because if the paramedics are saying he would have been dead for an hour or 2 hours, it means that they were driving around the car, right, with a dead body in their vehicle And they are going to claim that they were totally unaware that he pulled out a gun and shot himself and that they didn't hear the bullet either. Now that's going to be even more ludicrous and ridiculous than the story that they're already putting out. Because if he shot himself, at what point did he shoot himself? The first hour, the second hour, the third hour? Just after they left the location, when they arrived at the booking station? When? At what point of this 3-hour scenario did Little Vic allegedly shoot himself? That has to be the most important question that needs answered. Because if it was right at the end, then you've got to ask yourself, why did he, if he was going to take his life, why did he wait so long? If it was right at the beginning, then why did it take so long for them to call for help? Whichever way you look at it, it just doesn't add up.
Yeah, that's correct.
So, how do you see yourselves moving on with trying to find justice for Little Vic? Because for me, wow, we're stuck right there, Reverend Victor. We're stuck.
Yes. Yes. You know, see, and that's the thing that we're looking at, is that, you know, that because of the fact that there's no closure, because they settled the case, and but you know, we're still looking. We're still going to fight to find that information. That, like you said, those pieces of information that don't add up, we're going to find them. We're still looking, and you know, eventually it's going to come up. I know it's going to come up. Those things are going to come up, and when they do, then that's when we can submit to have, because we know there's no statute of limitation on murder. So we're going to continue to look. We're going to pound the pavement. We're going to keep shouting out, because eventually those documents that they're hiding going to find a way out.
You know, I know we've got a reasonable size audience who are locked in and tuned in and listening to the show as we speak. And they're going to be thinking about that 3-hour timeline, because I know I am. I'm absolutely dumbstruck as to why there's been no revelation as to at what point of that 3-hour timeline, because Reverend Victor, these are very important questions. At what point of that 3-hour timeline are they suggesting that Little Vic shot himself? I'll repeat it again, because if it was at the beginning, then it means that they were driving around for 3 hours with a guy who they claim shot himself in the chest. And the only way that they would be driving around for that amount of time was because they would have been unaware that while he was in the back of their car, he's pulled the gun out and shot himself in the chest, and they just didn't hear it. Or he traveled with them for 3 hours with the gun. When he could have killed them, he killed himself. How does that make any sense at all? Surely, as we can't allow them to get away with this.
Nope. That's right. We're gonna continue to fight it. All the breath we got going out of my body.
You know, Reverend Victor, I said at the beginning before we went on air that there was so much that we just actually didn't get to say in the first show. This story is so powerful and so ludicrous, it needed to be told again. I can't, for the life of me, comprehend what you and your family has gone through in all of this time, trying to get to the bottom of this story, trying to get some truth, trying to get some justice for the life of your beloved son. And why it's taken so long for some very basic, simple questions to be answered. If they got nothing to hide, why they don't just give you the information you need, answer those questions, and let's get on with the grieving process so you guys can get some closure.
Right. And, that's what we're asking. All we want is the truth. And we know they know the truth. That's all we want is the truth.
I would imagine that your family are absolutely tossing and turning and upside down with this. How have the rest of the family responded to the loss of little Vic?
Well, we all at the same point, that it's just so devastating because of the fact that he was the energy, a piece of a life source that's taken from us. So everyone, every holiday, different points. Each person have a history with Levic. Each one is sisters and brothers, so each one at certain times, because we didn't have that closure, still going through some of those same feelings that they felt at the day that we found out that he was killed. So and then me and my wife, it's definitely it's a daily struggle to continue to fight. Because I'm his legacy now. I have become my son's legacy. I have to speak for my son. And instead, it should be my son would have been speaking for me as being my legacy. But we have to go out and speak for my son. So it's very difficult at times. Hadn't gotten any better. And we still hadn't gotten any relief. And so that's what we're still, that is the major struggle, is when will the relief come? Are they going to give us the truth? Or do we continue to fight, in which we will continue to fight until the truth is brought to the light?
There was a moving tribute, a big documentary that features the story of little Vic. Tell us about that, please, Reverend Vic.
Sure. It's called Sugartown. There's a documentary called Sugartown. It aired on August the 6th of last year, and it was done in some set in the New Iberia, as well as and it was done by the Investigation Discovery Channel, IDGo, which is on IDGo.com. And it was a great production. They got an opportunity to show the actual some of the statements made by the officers, also the questioning of the sheriff, because the sheriff was charges were brought on the sheriff, but yet still he was acquitted on all charges. But the documentary is profound. It creates an anger. It also creates a sympathetic situation, but at the same time, it shows our fight and our plight to seek justice for my son. So I tell people that when we look at it, you cry at some points, you get angry at other points, and then the other point, it motivates you to want to go out and make sure that if anyone else is struggling or anyone else is going through this, that we lend a helping hand to support them, because firsthand you see what it has done to our family. That's generally what the other families are going through as well.
It's been coming up to almost 5 years. In March, it'll be 5 years since he passed. Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
And it's in the place where you guys are from. It's a small town, 30,000.
Yes.
Mostly black.
Yes. And and that was part of some of the situations there, that because of that, and they were afraid of the police officer. That's why we didn't get a lot of support, because individuals feared. They feared the Louis Alco, So. And he made sure that they feared him. So that was an issue. He made sure they feared him. That's for sure. He made sure that if they didn't do anything else, he made sure that there was a fear of Louis Alco. But but we didn't stop, and we're still not going to stop. We're going to carry on. We're going to continue the fight. But once again, it's just difficult. It's very difficult, and it's so unfortunate that we still live in a society where people are being judged by the color of their skin. Now, being judged by the color of their skin, and that officers take on the role of judge, the jury, and prosecutor, and it's a shame that we don't have enough individuals that are willing to stand with us and stand for it. But there is a lot of support, but we need more. We need more.
Absolutely. But a coroner's report, I mean, that must have been heartbreaking. When even in the face of all the evidence that was available to him, that he would still rule that Lil Vic shot himself, committed suicide.
Yes, he would, and see that once again, that's one of the most strange occurrences, because just seeing what we saw, what we know, give us a clear understanding of what he did and what they did to him. So I know the coroner having access to more resources than what we had. That definitely brings a discussion to us. That he had more resources, they had more, so they could have done more. We were saying that also. That the resources of the state, they didn't even the autopsy, and the same thing when they did the investigation. They didn't even do an independent investigation. They just reviewed the information that was sent to them by the Louisiana State Police and by the Sheriff's Department, in which they weren't supposed to be investigating themselves, but they lied about that as well. He did investigate himself, and then they wanted to say that it was the state investigation, when in reality it was their investigation.
Okay, let me just read this out. Okay, and it's really not just for you. It's really for us, so our audience can get a real understanding. A coroner's report, and this is from an article I managed to pull out. A coroner's report obtained exclusively by NBC News directly contradicts the police version of how a 22-year-old black man died in the backseat of a Louisiana police cruiser earlier this year. But still, says the man, whose hands were cuffed behind his back, shot himself. In a press release issued on March the 3rd, the day he died, the Louisiana State Police said Victor White III apparently shot himself in an Iberia Parish police car. According to the police statement, White had his hands cuffed behind his back when he shot himself in the back. Right? Let me just repeat that again. Right? According to the police statement, White had his hands cuffed behind his back when he shot himself in the back. Right. But according to the full final report of the Iberia Parish coroner, which was released nearly 6 months later and obtained exclusively by NBC News, White was shot in the front, not the back. So the police said he shot himself in the back, but the report says he shot himself in the front. How on earth could they get that so wrong? The bullet entered his right chest and exited under his left armpit. White was left-handed, right, according to family members. And according to the report, the forensic pathologist found gunshot residue in the wound, but not the sort of stippling that a close-range shot can sometimes produce. He also found abrasions on White's face. And yet, despite the contradictions, and even though White's hands were never tested for gunpowder residue, the Iberia Parish coroner still supported the central contention of the initial police statement issued back in March. Dr. Carl Ditch ruled that White shot himself and declared his death a suicide.
Yes.
Now, here's the thing. For 6 months, the police were claiming little Vic shot himself in the back. For 6 months, people were under the impression that he shot himself in the back. And they were able to get this story out that he was shot in the back. Professionals who are paid to do their job in this environment claimed, even with the body that they removed from the vehicle, paramedics took to the hospital, for 6 months, people were led to believe that little Vic had shot himself in the back because his hands were handcuffed behind his back. So there was never an attempt to suggest that he shot himself in the chest. They wanted to get away with he shot himself in the back. But then when 6 months' time comes up and the official report comes up and says, well, in fact, no, he wasn't shot in the back, he was actually shot in the chest. Pray tell me, Reverend Victor, because you must have been aware of this transformation in the information that was now coming out. What was your thoughts when, for 6 months you were led to believe he shot himself in the back, and now you're hearing, in fact, he didn't shoot himself in the back, he was actually shot in his chest, in the front? How did you respond to that? Hello, Reverend Vic? Hello, Reverend Vic? Reverend Vic? Probably needs a little time to compose himself, and we understand that, sir. It's a terrible thing to have had to have gone through. To take away the life of your son, corrupt it with lies, leave your family in pieces, and then you're left to pick up the pieces. But surely they can't justify how they led people to believe that he shot himself in the back. And eventually it comes out that he actually... And it's impossible for him to have been handcuffed behind his back.
What happened?
I don't know. He's here.
Okay.
He's now gone off. Yeah.
Try to call in again. Try to call in.
He's online. He's muted his mic.
Yes. Yes, he is, boss.
I think he's a bit emotional at the minute. Teresa, can you just try and call him on his cell phone?
I have him on the line, boss. I have him on the line. I'm going to have him call back in.
Okay, he doesn't need to call back in. He's already on the call.
He can hear us. Yes.
His mic is muted. Okay, he's back.
I'm here. I'm here.
He's
I'm
back.
here, Reverend.
He's back. He's back.
Hello?
Hi.
Reverend, can you hear me?
Yeah, Teresa, he's back. Hi, Reverend Vic.
Can you call back in, Reverend?
Teresa, he's back. He's back.
There you go. There you go.
Okay. It's a difficult time, Reverend Vic. We know it is.
Yes.
So we were just trying to get to how that would have impacted you, having been led to believe through the police evidence that little Vic had shot himself in his back, and then 6 months later you're finding out that they're now trying to, well, it's not the evidence shows that he actually shot himself, or the shot was in his chest, in his front. How did the news of that change of evidence and information, how did that news impact you?
Well, it did. It impacted us to the point where, man, we had gotten so infuriated and so angry at the point in time that, like you said, for almost 6 months, we were led to believe that he was shot in the back. And like I said, when we get to the coroner, so we released the report. We released the report. That's why it was exclusive, because we wanted the world to see that they were still trying to hide something. And so I mean, we were so angry at that point, we had no other recourse but to try to find some way to make sense of what they were doing. So even though we had the strong belief that it was a cover-up, well, now that we had some evidence, we can see that it was a cover-up. But you know what? That didn't change. It didn't change anything for us, nor did it validate him murdering my son. So then we became even more angry, broken system in which that you're going to hide or cover up the evidence points that my son was killed. Like you said, the stripling found around the wound was not like as if he shot himself at close range.
There was no evidence to support any of the coroner's findings.
No, none.
So that's why I struggle to find how he still reached that verdict.
Yeah. Well, because once again, as I told the coroner when me and my wife was that they was all working together, and I asked him, I said, well, how much do they pay? How much did they pay you? Well, I told the coroner. I said, how much did they pay you to come up with this decision like that? And he told me that, well, he don't make that much money. So I told him, you selling out for a little bit of money? Is that what you're saying? And I told my wife, look, we just need to get out of here. Let's leave, because now you can really see what a cover-up is. And so all of them are part of it. And so we left the coroner's office at that point.
When you think of all of the lies that have been told, and you and your family have still, almost 5 years on, still not been allowed to grieve properly, still not allowed to have proper closure, still waiting for justice and the truth to be told. This must be very painful times for you, Reverend Vic.
Oh, yeah. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And all the stuff that we're going to have going, and we're still attempting to get justice. So it is even more so. And every time we celebrate another year of it, we're not farther away from the truth. I see we're getting closer to the truth.
With each day, you get closer to the truth, and we continue to obviously pray in support of everything that you're doing. In looking at what happened to little Vic, we did talk in the beginning, quite very briefly, about the escalation of corruption and people of color being killed by cops in the state of Louisiana. How bad are things in Louisiana, Reverend Vic?
Oh, well, I believe that we still one of the worst in the entire nation, because of the simple fact that the killings are still going on. Just here in Lake Charles, we've had a young man that was killed, shot in the back multiple times, but they haven't told us how many times. And then no one is saying anything. We had incidents since my son. We're still getting killing, and they're telling the family members, that that it's under investigation, that that you all can't speak. Well, I told you we can speak. You need to speak up. You need to let everybody know that these things are going on, that this is what's happening to your family, because that way they set the narrative. You see, so oh man, it is worse. And not only are they killing, they're covering it up. And then and we have no recourse, because especially when they deem it suicide, like in my son's case, they said that when they said that it was suicide, they said that we're not victims. We're not victims. We've lost my son, but they say we aren't victims, so we aren't entitled to any rights or anything by way of assistance from the federal government, nor the state government, nor the parish in which they took my son's life. They said we're not even entitled to anything because of the fact we are not victims. And even with all the evidence, it points to us being victims. They're saying we aren't victims.
And you're not victims because the coroner has deemed it that little Vic committed suicide. And
that's correct. But they don't take into account nor into affect the sleepless nights, the depression, anxiety that we suffered as a result of waiting on the autopsy report to see if it was going to validate the death of my son. And when it comes out, it only they support each other. See, that's the worst part of this. So now we must continue to live with all these.
We've got you breaking up again, Reverend Vic. I'm not sure if you've popped out or whatever, but your signal's going. It's very weak.
I said, oh, that's my signal. You said,
yeah, we lost you for about a whole minute there.
Okay.
But yeah, so, I mean, are you now working with other families in your community and stuff like that who are going through similar stuff like you are?
Oh, yes, definitely. We have. Even when it's happened, we will continue to go with those families in which they were suffering. For we have not only with police brutality, whether they was killed, because, like I said, there are several families that have suffered the same plight we have. And so we are not only in our state, but we've connected nationally.
Yeah. Do you know, it's right, Yolanda McNair says the practice is called victimizing the victim. And they dehumanize our loved ones in order for them to justify their kill. It's a very shameful thing that they do. And they need to be held accountable. And we as a people will continue to fight until they are held accountable. I believe in the Almighty God and His power and His justice. And He will prevail because He doesn't let us down.
Oh, yes, I'm a firm believer that, all these things are going to work out to the good. I really know that, God is watching over us. God is leading and guiding us into all things that we're going to lead the truth. And so that's how I know that that's the spearhead. I mean, that's the centerpiece of what we've done. That was the centerpiece of my son's life. And that's the essence of who we are and what we are. That we're not going to, like what I would say, we're not looking for revenge, but we're going to continue to seek justice. And so that's what we're saying to these other families as well. As well to the other families, it's not about revenge. This should be about understanding that your son's legacy or your child's legacy, it lives on through you. So whatever we model to them and taught them growing up and as they reach adulthood, those are the principles that we should live by. Those are the principles that we should model. Those are the principles, are the standards of living in which we should hold ourselves to, as well as those in which we fight this fight of justice with as well.
Because due to your faith, Reverend Vic,
yes.
your teaching, your beliefs are to forgive. In the midst of all of this, have you been able to forgive? Has it been difficult to forgive? Did it take you time to forgive? How did that process work for you?
Well, it took quite a while, because here's the very people that wanted to put in God we trust on the vehicles, when in reality, He said He was above God. So and yet still He had individuals working for Him and working with Him that thought they were above God. So it was very difficult to find a road to forgiving them, that could kill my son. And, that's what I'll stress that too. Not only I'll stress that to the church, that there is a process to forgiveness. And so therefore, we don't beat ourselves up if one cannot forgive right away, because it all depends on the damage, how great the damage was. You see, and I was telling them, my son, like, that's the greatest damage that a parent could ever feel, because my son should have been burying me and not me burying my son. So yes, it was a long, tedious process, and to the point that the sheriff said he wasn't going, he didn't even offer condolences or nothing until he found, like I said, until the autopsy came out to so-called validate his sheriff officers. That didn't validate, so that just grew, that put a wedge even further between myself and them, and saying that we're going to forgive them. And one thing the attorney said, that we should take solace in the fact that there are officers that were placed, that are incarcerated. I know, to me, they were only incarcerated, the longest may have been to 3 years, maybe 3 to 4 years. Well, I don't take solace in that, because my son's life is gone. There's a void that we will face for the rest of our life, and sometimes that eye for an eye come in, because the fact they murdered my son, but they get away with misdemeanor charges.
Yeah. I would also imagine that because of your faith, you've also had to be the rock for your family while they've gone through their turmoil.
Yes, definitely we have, because at the time they want to get on the social media thing and say certain things, do certain things. I have to remind them, that's not the way we do things. You have to sit back and think about it. Vent to one another. We find sources and where we can vent, where that it doesn't come back to create undue hardship on the other members of the family. And that's what we had to come to realize, and that was a struggle for my family. And sometimes it's still a struggle for them, because because of my faith and the faith that they grew up in, that I have to let them know, well, no, you just have to, we allow certain things to go on, even though we know they're wrong, because the truth is going to trump out the wrong eventually. So and have to be the bedrock. When they're 3 o'clock in the morning, when my daughter's saying, I'm thinking about little Vic and I don't know what to do, and I want to do some of my sons that were close, saying, well, this is weighing heavy on me. They cry. So I have to be that shoulder to cry on as well. The same as when my wife is going through with those moments for herself, that I have to let her know that this is going to be all right, that the fight is not over. It may seem like that they've gotten off, but I can assure you that we're not going to let that happen. We're going to make sure that they see, that they hear, that they know that we're right there we're right there behind them every step of the way, letting them know what you did to my son is wrong. And if you think you've gotten away by man's standards, maybe one thing, but God going to have the last say so, and I am confident in that.
Amen. Amen. Just one more question before we go, Vic. I would have imagined that people would have challenged you and your faith in the face of all of this adversity. Some maybe even saying to you, where is your God in all of this?
Oh, yes. We've had that. We've had individuals threaten us to the point that, saying that if I was such a godly man, I would have just been let this go. We have, like you say, other people saying, well, if you have that strong a belief in God, then why is it that your son has been taken away and this and that? And I was, well, that was the reason why. My son was a catalyst in some of those individuals getting arrested. My son just was a catalyst in exposing the corruption and all the abuse that was going on in Iberia, not only in Iberia Parish, but in the neighboring parish and the Lafayette Parish as well. So also with the Alton Sterling case, my son's case, so there were some things come out that they had to put in place. So, I see in which that I say to myself, I wish it wasn't my son, but it is my son. So like I said, so when those individuals come up and some of the things that they put on Facebook to challenge and say he was a thug and he was this and he was that, when I know differently. So sometimes I would comment and say, well, it's very easy for you to say that because it wasn't your son that was laying in the casket. It's easy for you to say that because you don't know the details or the inner workings of where it was. Or someone say, well, I've been there all my life and I didn't experience that. I say, well, maybe because you lived on the other side of the track. So like I said, sometimes it gets very, very hard not to go back to a state in which God has brought me from the change that has occurred in my life. But we're still holding on and we're still hanging in here.
Vic, I really do thank you for sharing that story with us again. Again, as I said, it was just so powerful and so ludicrous. We really wanted to give it another airing and give our audience an opportunity to hear it again and digest it properly, to understand not just how corrupt law enforcement and that stuff is out there in Louisiana, but just how strong you are and how much faith you've had to rely on in order to get you and your family through this absolutely terrible ordeal. But we thank you for trusting us to share this story again, and we still look forward to updates and continued relationship as we continue to pursue the fight of justice and truth in Jesus' name.
Yes, and we definitely we are truly grateful for you allowing us the platform, and man, we're grateful for the work that you continue to do as well in the fight for justice and the plight of those individuals and these families that are suffering. And wow, it's so awesome that how the Lord is using you and the program in which, all the individuals that you reach and they get an opportunity to hear our story, and coming from the place where we are, a small town, a small town with the same problem as the Lord's city. And so we're definitely grateful for you. We're indebted to you as well because of the fact that, you are continuing to you're pounding away at what is going on, and you're shedding light on it all over the world. And we definitely appreciate you, and we appreciate Sister TJ for the assistance as well.
Thank you very much for that, Reverend Victor. We thank you again, and we will look forward to catching up with you. Just before we go, I just want to bring in that very same assistant, TJ, who's going to give us an update on what we got coming up next week. Are you there, TJ?
I am. I'm here.
So what do we got coming on next week, TJ?
First, can I comment to Vic just for a moment? Going back to revenge, the Lord said, revenge is mine.
Amen.
Stand up for what you believe in, even if we have to stand alone. And that sometimes makes us feel like we're standing alone a lot. But I want to tell you, Reverend, that your constant voice inspires us, and your message enables us to keep on keeping on, like you said. Your testimony will be carried in the hearts of others with conviction. And the bottom whole line is surrender to the Lord, because He's our only salvation. He's the only one that can do this.
Yeah. We
can't do this alone. Your integrity is incredible, and I commend you for telling your story through the grief, and I can hear your grief, and I can feel your pain, and you just keep on, and I stand with you.
Yeah.
We all stand with you.
Amen.
Yes. Yes, man. We have an incredible support team, an incredible support system, and we're grateful that you all are part of it as well.
Thank you.
And I appreciate that. Next week we have Luann Smith will be here.
Yeah. We've got a month of returnees, right?
Right.
Okay, so we've
got a few new ones. It's going to be an exciting year. It's very full.
Yeah.
But we need to have these returned ones come like Reverend's story, because of how powerful it is, and how it will reach the corners of each of the earth where we are.
Amen, yeah. I do think we've got so we've got Luann Smith, we've got Scott Rushing, and we've got Marissa Barrera all on this month, right?
Right.
Okay. And furthermore, if anybody is listening and they've got a story that they want us to hear, our contact details are available. We'll add our business cards to this link, right? Our new business cards.
Yes.
Yeah. We'll add them to this link, which will have all the contact details on how you can get hold of us. You can direct message me or direct message Teresa, and we will get back to you, and we'll try and arrange some dates and some dialogue so we can understand what your story are. But don't just listen in and think that we're only interested in the big stories. We are interested in any story of truth and justice. Your fight is our fight. Our God is your God. We're in this together, okay? So, Teresa, we thank you for all the work that you do. We look forward to next week. It's all that we've got time for this week. I want to thank the Reverend Victor White again for sharing the story. And just remember, it can happen to anybody. It can happen to anybody. It's such a sad, sad indictment of the current state of our society today. But it can happen to anybody. We hope that it doesn't happen to you. This is me, Kervin Julian, and TJ Gallagher signing off from Issues Today.
Thank you very much. And Reverend, thank you very much.
Yes,
and I'll
thank you
again soon, boss.
Okay, we're back next week. We're out of here.
It's for the people who are wondering why we're in the streets and we're outraged. It's basically a rundown of what's happened, and this is recent. And it's if you run, you die. # Walter Scott. If you stay and get arrested, you die. # Freddie Gray. Lay down while handcuffed, you die. # Eric Harris. # Oscar Grant. If you fight back, you die. # Trayvon Martin. If you mind your business, you die. # John Crawford. Put your hands up, you die. # Mike Brown. Proclaim your innocence, you die. # Eric Garner. Getting married, you die. # Sean Bell. Pansagging, you die. # Irvin Edwards. Beg for your life, you die. # Thaddeus McCarroll. # Cedric Barty. Just alive at 12 years old outside playing, you die. # Tamir Rice. Be outside, you die. # Rekia Boyd. Be at home chilling, you die. # Katherine Johnston. Run into your home, you die. # Ramarley Graham. Injured asking for help, you die. # Jonathan Farrell. Be in a stairwell, you die. # Akai Gurley. Smoke a cigarette, you die. # Sandra Bland.
1, 2, 3, swing it.
Do you have an old sound tape or your favorite cassette tape that you want converted to CD or MP3 format? Do you need a demo CD, radio ad, a DJ, or even a sound system for your wedding, birthday, or special occasion? Then why not get in contact with KTR Records on 07931 152 448, or check out our website on www.ktrrecords.com. We have been in business since 2004 and also undertake community projects. So for your remixes, duplets and all your sound editing needs, why not contact KTR Records, official sponsor of World Jam Global Radio. KTR Records, coming your way.
I was terrified about sharing the vulnerabilities of people with difficulties reading and spelling words. However, I could see the value in sharing, and I have taken the time to make some notes about this in my book, Dyslexic: The Silent Difference. You can get your copy now at www.a1tribe.com or amazon.com or amazon.co.uk. Thank you again, everyone, for your support.
Once again, I just want to take this time out to thank each and every one of you that have joined us on www.worldjamglobalradio.com. Issues Today, World Jam Global Radio. We're back next week, same time, same place. Our guest, Luann Smith.
I paid for my crime.
We had on a group show several months ago.
I already did my time.
But hers was a powerful story, and she's back next week.
I already did my time. I paid for my crime.
Don't forget, if you got a story that you want us to share,
For my crime.
we'll add the contact details shortly.
Back in the day, I didn't really care about the system. It was all about survival. It was do or die. I had too many rivals. I was too young and foolish to stay in school. I learned my lessons in the streets. There was not a man I couldn't beat. I was good with my hands and very quick on my feet. I was swimming in women. I had girls all over the street. I was getting money. Life was so sweet. Now things have changed. The whole game has been rearranged. I'm a changed man. Don't need no gun in my hand. It ain't about being no gangster. Life is too short to spend it all in jail. Trying to cope with this living hell. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime.